Welcome back to First Light. I'm your host, Chris Keller, and today I'm sitting down with someone whose story is as raw and real as it is inspiring. James Helm is the founder and CEO of TopDog Law, a firm you've no doubt seen on social media or even on billboards. But what I love about James isn't just the brand he's built, it's the man behind it. Before he became TopDog, James battled through addiction, found recovery, and rebuilt his life from the ground up. He's taken that same discipline that saved his life and applied it to building a firm, competing in high rocks, and yes, even hitting the pickleball courts. This conversation isn't just about law or marketing, it's about resilience, grit, and the choices we make every single day to show up better than we were yesterday. Let's dive in. James, I want to welcome you to First Light, man. I've been so excited about this episode. Your journey is just so inspiring. And typically we start with tell us about yourself and tell us your story and jump into it. But I know that you're headed to a competitive pickleball match. And so we got to start with pickleball, man. I mean, pickleball is a crave. So, how's an attorney turning into a competitive pickleball player?
Oh man, Chris, I'm excited to be here. I love your energy, brother, and I feel like you and I are brothers from another. So I'm glad to be able to chop it up today. Pickleball is something that I found 2.5 years ago. I started just playing recreationally in the park. Ended up getting a house, got a court at my house. I started looking at houses, and then I saw one had a court and the others didn't. And I forgot about everything else, right? I'm a single guy, so I'm like, I'm going to get the house at the court. And I have my friends there. I have a sauna, cold plunge, speakers. It's a whole setup out there. It's great. But I was on the fence of should I actually start competing in tournaments? Obviously, we run law firms, we compete there. We have a lot of responsibilities. I'm like, I don't know if I want to take it to that level of seriousness. I like having it as an outlet, a fun thing. And then I got my taste for my first tournament. And I know you do Ironmans or races, but pressure is a privilege, and the ability to wake up, even how I'm feeling today, right? And be a little anxious, have that performance anxiety, get that adrenaline rush of walking in there. And then the feeling of when I've won the tournament. I mean, I got more joy out of winning my first PPA tournament this year than I have in any of the stuff we've done on the legal side, just because I was so proud of myself that I went in there and executed and won all 5 matches and got to the match court for the finals with the referee in front of people and finished the job, and it's any area of life where I can push myself and be able to see myself break through that resistance and achieve some kind of desired result. It just, there's no type of dopamine like that.
We're going to talk more about pickleball in a little bit, but let's introduce yourself to the crowd a little bit. So this competitive spirit, as a entrepreneur, as a founder, CEO of a firm, and everything we do, we're competitive. That's just who we are. But where does that competitive spirit really come from you? And how did you kind of hone that competitive spirit and harness it to do amazing things that you're doing?
I just got back from Tony Robbins near you, and the question he always asks that I think super relevant is, whose love did you crave more, your mother or your father? And for me, it was my dad, and my dad was a Division I college wrestler, and so the way I got his love was to be financially successful and athletically successful. And so when I was young, I that meant playing every sport. I didn't just do in the fall soccer, football. I did both. I didn't do baseball or lacrosse. There was a time period when I was doing both in the spring, right? I played recreational basketball, but wrestling was the sport I took serious. And so while I was doing kind of all those sports, I think what kind of emerged, you start to have to pick one. And wrestling was the sport that, I won tournaments, when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. My dad taking me and sitting with me. He was at every single one of my sporting events, going to gyms all over the Northeast. Pennsylvania is one of the best wrestling states in the country where I grew up. But we would go to New Jersey, Maryland, New York, and I would compete all day on the weekends in these wrestling tournaments. And what happened with me was I fell away from that childhood competitive spirit as I started to get into my teenage years. And you and I, share this in common, right? I fell into drugs and alcohol. And when I detached from athletics, and tried to be, cool and fit in and do the social stuff, I really started to lose myself. And so what's been so fun is now, and I can give you the whole rundown, but now 9 years later, I just celebrated 9 years of complete sobriety yesterday. I texted you, and uh, 9 years later, here I am back, that 12-year-old kid flying to Las Vegas for a pickleball tournament, training for a high rocks race. And I really do feel like I'm leaning back into what I loved when I was young. Like I've come full circle, and this is kind of the inner child best version of myself is doing these competitions and things.
Well, let's talk about that because 9 years of being sober. I'm at 2.5. It's an incredible journey, but let's go back to kind of the beginning and where you were at in life and realize something's got to change. You go to law school, and I know you got a JD MBA, and then I know crazy story of turning down big corporate jobs to create your own firm, and so kind of take us through when you realize, man, I got something's got to change in my life.
Yeah, so I told you about wrestling. Wrestling was that sport for me growing up. I was in middle school, eighth grade. I'm wrestling with the high school team. Thought I was going to go to college and wrestle Division 1 like my dad did. And the first, major curveball that life threw at me was I was wrestling a Pennsylvania state champion. I was in a 2-to-1 match, and I ended up over my head and came down on my rotator cuff in a really bizarre way in my shoulder. And I actually tore the subscapularis, which is the back of the rotator cuff. Usually, doctors only see that in skiing injuries, like where your pole gets stuck. But mine was ripped completely in half. And so I think I was about 15 or 16. I had a major shoulder operation, and I was prescribed prescription painkillers. And at that time, I didn't get addicted to the painkillers, but what that did is it introduced me to pills. And when I ended up, running into those pills later in high school, when members of my football team and whatever were doing them for fun, I had this knowledge of like, hey, I took these. Like these aren't going to kill me. Like they were fine. And I ended up tearing a second shoulder wrestling and had surgery on that one and got pain pills for that one. And then I think I also have this genetic condition in my family where you look at my dad's side of the family, there's alcoholism and drug addiction. His brothers and sisters, unfortunately, my only cousin on that side of the family who was around my age, grew up in our town, died of an overdose of drugs. And so there's definitely some type of genetic predisposition to drugs. For me, it was really about fitting in. I was an athlete and a class president and a kid that was in the advanced classes. But I wanted more than that. I wanted the social validation of going and hanging out with the cool kids and going to the parties when someone's parents were out of town, and doing drugs and being around that scene gave me this kind of edge to my personality that really served me in the counterculture of like high school and college, right? It was like I had that edge, and um, I knew I shouldn't be doing it, but for a while there, Chris, I could manage it. Like I started doing Oxycontin for fun when I was 17, and this is right in the middle of the pill opioid epidemic, and that continued for me from 17 all the way to 25. I remember I went to college, and my high school girlfriend, who didn't get into Penn State and was staying home, said something like, hey, well, you're a pillhead. And I remember thinking like, oh, she's upset that I'm leaving to go to college and she's staying in our hometown. But it did register with me like, oh, here's somebody who knows me really well, who's calling me out on this drug use. And so when I went to Penn State, I remember thinking like, I'm not going to get into drugs. Like I'm going to party, I'm going to have the college experience, but it's not going to be centered on drugs. And I did that in my freshman year. I got perfect grades. I went out socially. It was probably the best social year of my life. You're in college, you're free. It was amazing. But then my sophomore year, I joined a fraternity that was really into drugs, people selling drugs in the house, doing drugs, same type of edgy personality. I think I got attracted to that again. And before I knew it, I owed a bunch of the kids money in the house and was doing Percocets every single day. And that was the first time where I told my parents. I remember going and telling them, "Hey, I got this problem with pills. You know, I don't, I owe money to people and I don't have any way of getting it. I don't want to, go do bad things to get the money. So like, I need your help. And also, like, there's this doctor that does this, Vivitrol shot where it blocks your opioid receptor. So that was my solution, Chris, is I was unwilling to actually look at the root cause of why might I be doing drugs every day and like what's the long-term solution to figuring out why I keep doing that. And instead it was like, oh, just get this injection every 30 days and then keep living your life how you want to live it. It was like, it's like the miracle solution that doesn't exist. So I'm sure you could assume how that ended.
so, so tell us, what was that first step for recovery for you? If the pill didn't work, or if the shot didn't work, what was that next step? And also take us through like how that season of your life really kind of shaped your purpose and the drive that carries you today.
Yeah. I I remember after getting the shot and like having that moment with my parents and genuinely feeling, I mean, because of, a tough dad, like I had a block on crying. This is one of the fewer times I remember crying. Like telling my parents that I was addicted to drugs was very, very, very hard for me. And that was something I had put off from the time I started at 17. I think all the way to about like 21 was when I told them, or 20, it was like near the end of college. And um, I started doing the shot and I was committed to doing it. And what happens, like, to anybody who uh, hasn't truly changed, but instead is looking for kind of the short term fix, is eventually I thought, well, instead of getting these every 30 days, I can get them every 40 days or every 45 days. And that would give me a week or a week and a half to have a little fun in between. And that was how I thought. And I remember going home. The worst year of my life was my year after undergrad. I took 1 year off between undergrad and doing the JD MBA. And I think I had this idea that I would leave Penn State, which was this fantasy land of fraternity parties and going out drinking 4 or 5 nights a week. And I would go home and I would be this successful, AP class president type of guy that I had been when I was younger. And that first year was like the hardest because I'm living at my parents', the party's over, and I'm stuck with the bad habit loser version of myself that I had become, and I knew it. And so I still remember, and I remember coming home from a job that I didn't care about after spending like the whole day on Barstool or ESPN or whatever, slacking off and like drinking beers in my parents' basement by myself and like still going up to Penn State on the weekends. I had a girlfriend that was still there, right? Like I was trying to, find any way to find any type of happiness. And law school, when I got into law school, was a big break for me because I was the last person admitted to Rutgers Law School, Chris. I was literally didn't get in until somebody dropped out on the orientation and they opened up a spot and I took it. And so I was scared to death about flunking out. So I was able to, and this was my story throughout my whole addiction. I was able to then take a semester and lock it in mentally. And I finished in the top, 10% of the class, right? I tried hard. I was always capable. I proved to myself I could do it. But then, sure enough, what happened again is I got cocky. I fell back into the old patterns. And really, it was midway through my JD MBA where things started to spiral to a degree they had never spiraled before. And what I felt was I was losing control of being one person at law school and like the ambitious side and running around doing all these things I shouldn't be doing. And it was almost like a ticking time bomb was going off in my head. And so I started to think like if I don't get this now, I'm gonna ruin my life. Like something is going to happen that I'm gonna get a felony charge for something, or I'm gonna have something really terrible happen, and the possibility of what could have been with James Helm and this like successful thing that I think I am deep inside, like that opportunity is going to be forever gone. And so I'll tell you about going to rehab in a second, but I think you realize this with your own journey, like how many guys that have already lost everything, right? They've lost their marriage, their kids won't talk to them, they have 3 felonies, they're working at a construction job, and they have to find the courage deep down to go get sober. That's hard, man. That's hard because that upside just isn't there, right? And that was what I felt like really helped me out. They say the first time is, a window, it's grace because I knew if I could, if I could get this one issue, this one huge liability I had a whole future ahead of me. But I wasn't going to be able to have that future and still do this on the side. Like there had to be like a major, major change. And I had a 3 weeks of just the absolute lowest of the lows. And I had finally agreed to my mom to go to rehab. And the rehab was 5 minutes up the road from me, from where I grew up. So, picture this: I'm this JD MBA student who thinks he's, hot shit, and here I am, 5 minutes up the road from my hometown, in a rehab, and I remember just thinking, like, where did things go wrong? Like how did this end up here?
Yeah, it's amazing because it's the same. We all live these same stories. Unfortunately, as I've always talked about, I didn't get to that rock bottom moment where I lost it all. There was so many times along the way that I could have lost it all: my marriage, my relationship with my kids, my business, everything. I was putting everything at risk for alcohol, right? I didn't know how
Mm.
to live without it. But now that I've let that go, it's amazing, and I've developed this discipline. So sobriety takes discipline, and you've proven that 9 years now, which is an amazing accomplishment. Congratulations! But running a growing business does too, and I know that you have a lot of habits and routines that you rely on to kind of carry you through. So I want to talk about that recovery journey, but also what are those habits now that you've put into place that's giving you this 9 years of sobriety and allowed you just to grow this massive business, because that doesn't come without a lot of discipline
Chris,
and a lot of
one
hard
thing
work.
I yeah, Chris, one thing I love about you is you're just disciplined. Like you're unbelievably disciplined, and I think it garners a lot of respect from the people around you who can actually observe your discipline, because discipline is hard. And I think there's actually something in the pain that we went through with addiction and knowing the other side that drives us to that discipline. It's like that structure. Um, and I see it in you and I see it in me. That structure is really what supports me through um, the transformation of who I become. And I think for me, when I was in that rehab, there was a guy who was a lawyer, and he was 1984, he had clerked for Chief Justice Simandl, who's deceased now, but as the Chief Justice for the District of New Jersey. And, I had taken a lot of pride of like, hey, I'm in the chambers of the Chief Justice for the District of New Jersey. And so to be paired in drug rehab with a lawyer 30 years ahead of me who has lost his family, is talking out loud about suicide, and is had worked for the same judge that I was working for that summer. It was just like, man, I can't be this guy. This is not what my future is going to be. And you talk about like God, the universe, the fact that the odds of me being paired with him, and having that, here's where you're going unless you do something about it. Um, I'm so grateful. And, I came out of there, and it took a while, Chris. It was like, you know, a month or 2 months of, I'm not sure if I really want to do this. I was 25. I couldn't imagine not having a drink at my wedding or not going out with my friends anymore. How would I watch football? Just stupid things like that.
Play
But
golf.
what happened is, yeah, play golf, right? In the interim, I started to take some actions, and I started to see what was happening in my life. And those things were like simple habits that I just didn't do when I was going through my addiction. You know, it was waking up and going for a run. It was eating healthy. It was service. Like, you know, I started just doing community service, like with my church or with, you know, homeless shelter. I just started giving back, you know, and like I'm like, man, I'm starting to feel really good about myself. Because what happens when you go through addiction is you make promises to yourself that you're always going to change. And then what do? You go do the thing you promised everyone that you weren't going to do. And so, what does that do to your self confidence, right? It has you feeling like the lowest possible low in the world because you don't believe yourself. Like, you know, you're full of shit. And so, then to be able to start to piece together days in sobriety where I would wake up, I would run, I would, you know, not eat that cheesesteak for lunch. I would eat a salad, right? I would do some type of service. I would read a book. Um, I would journal. I would start to do these little habits, these micro habits that I would stack on top of each other. And I always tell people self esteem is built by you keeping the promises you make to you. And so as I started to do that every month and then month after month and then year after year, I got 2 years into my sobriety journey and I felt like I could do anything. I was fit. I had done really, really well in school. I had helped a friend start a company and go from $0 to 1 million in his first year. So all those things went into this idea of me creating Top Dog Law and believing in myself that I could be successful in business. It is 100% attributable to my sobriety journey and the 2 years of self confidence I built prior to launching my business. And then, you know, the last 6 years, I've been able to just take that consistency, that discipline, that rigor, and just apply it to business. And I think that's, you know, the number one factor in why we've been able to grow so fast.
Let's talk about that. I know you were recently on the Inc. 5000 list, and not just on the list, but like at the top of the list, like 2,400% growth, like crazy numbers,
Yeah.
which is incredible. So let's start a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the idea to start your own firm, and now I know you're in the top 1% of personal injury firms in pure volume and what you're doing. So talk about how you had this idea to start this personal injury firm and how you built Top Dog to be such a household brand now.
Mm. I remember going to this service at Epic Church in Philly, and they gave this whole presentation about like this leads to that. So I didn't have it. Sounds good in hindsight to say like, oh, you know, you had this whole plan, like this master plan all along, but that's not at all how it works. Like I basically how it really happened was I was post rehab, um, no social life at an apartment complex in Philly, trying to figure out how to fill my night and weekend time in a world without any type of partying. And I decided I'm going to write a memoir. Like, I'm going to recount all my addiction experiences. And so I would go to this same apartment conference room every day and I would get out my laptop and I would start working on chronicling the last 7 years of my life. It's part a book hopefully someday I'll still publish, and part it was just like cathartic therapy for somebody who had just gone through a lot. And there was a guy at my apartment complex from my high school who had made $250,000 selling digital advertising, and this was somebody who was like the class clown in my high school, was like, not, I didn't think was, in the level of classes or headed for the level of success I was. And so it blew my mind to be like, man, this guy's killing it. What the heck is he doing? And the fact that he had taken that $250,000 job and now was starting his own digital marketing agency and was targeted to attorneys of all people. I'm like, this is really interesting. And so, Chris, I started selling. I did a pure commission deal. My dad was an insurance salesman, and I grew up. My first job in the summers was cold calling bars and restaurants and getting appointments for the renewals. for their liquor liability insurance. That was like what us kids did. They called it the bullpen. And so I knew I could do sales. Like my dad did sales. I had had that experience in the bullpen. And I was a kid in law school selling to lawyers. And I'm like, I think this could work. And so I started, funny story, I started mass spamming people from the Rutgers.edu domain. Like I was sending out thousands of emails. Like I had this tool that I had put in where I was scraping. I had a VA. This was like, oh man, 2016, 2017. I had a VA who was scraping off the Google My Business profiles, every law firm owner. And then I was pumping out these emails for my EDU domain because they never went to spam. They hit the inbox every time. And how I position it is like, hey, I'm this law student and I'm looking for a mentor. But I also have like something that could really help your firm. So it's kind of this like finagling of this finessing that people with addiction histories do so well, right? Like, but I was a good sales guy, and so I closed a heck of a lot of deals. Was making like more money than I ever made in my whole life. But most importantly, I had clients that we were doing their SEO or pay per click that were law firm owners all over America, and they all had personal injury. Like you realize quickly, like the best clients were the personal injury lawyers. And so I started seeing these guys' businesses and I had like a couple epiphanies. I think one epiphany was these are really like the service they're providing is help with accidents, but they're really businesses. This is very different than my summer associate position at the big corporate law firm where I was doing like brief writing. And I knew that I did not like brief writing. I did not like, law journal or any of that stuff. But the business stuff, that was actually very interesting to me. And then the second thing was I enjoyed marketing and I realized that a lot of the best marketers had the best law firms. A micro kind of break was when I had this client in Dallas. He's still there, Michael Uvalli at Law Boss, where I saw he marketed his firm as Law Boss, 1-800 Law Boss. And I remember thinking like, man, that is so crazy. That's so stupid. Like, and a couple weeks went by and I just couldn't let it go in my head, Chris. And I'm like, I totally changed my perspective. I'm like, this guy's a genius. I'm like, this is the smartest thing. Who's your lawyer? Oh, it's not these 4 last names strung together. It's Law Boss. I'm like, he's probably cleaning up. So it was all these little pieces of like, I think law firms are moving towards branding. I know they're run like businesses. I know how to do the marketing. And then it was just getting the courage to put those pieces together and say, hey, I have my law license. I can create my own law firm brand. I can get my own cases. The hard thing for me was I didn't know how to do the cases. So it was like I had to figure out that part. I had never been an associate, right? So I literally had no idea how to do a personal injury case. I knew how to get personal injury cases, no idea how to do them. So the hack that I had there was I just set up my office right above like a old family run PI firm in Philly. And we made a deal that was like, hey, you take the upstairs. Whenever I get a case that I don't know how to do, I send it to him. And his name's Bob Fine, great guy. In his spare time, he taught me like the nuts and bolts of like how to do a motor vehicle accident case. And so I would just run upstairs and downstairs and upstairs and downstairs all day, learning what a PIP application was and letters of representation and how to write a demand and all these things that are like personal injury lawyer 101. I got to learn with my own firm, which I feel like was such a head start because I was learning as I was going.
What do you credit the big jump from, having opening up your own firm, being there in that store, that 4 right above this other PI firm, to now where you're at, where you're everywhere, you're national. What's that? What do you credit that jump to? That success?
There were a couple of steps. The first one was social media, like lightning in a bottle social media. I think that it would be very hard to duplicate kind of the momentum we built around our profile and in the algorithm in like 2018, 2019. I mean, we were getting, millions of views per month. My DM was full of leads and cases, and I didn't have to pay any advertising dollars. So you know how it is. If you don't have any advertising dollars and you're just full of cases and you're doing the stuff yourself, like your profits are pretty dang good, you know? I think the thing that I would give myself credit for is from the very beginning, I was really clear on wanting to build like one of the biggest things in America. And so um, I always approached it from that mentality of like, I'm I'm going to keep reinvesting everything to continue to grow. The other big pivot I had was there was a lawyer in Philly who had like 50 lawyers. We still work with him today, 200 full time employees, and um, he took me to a Flyers game. I still remember because, like, I grew up sitting all the way up top, me and my dad, like, but I remember my dad's like, you can really see the full ice from here. Like, it's great up here. And, like, it's in hindsight, we just, like, didn't want to get the super expensive tickets. But, now I'm going with this lawyer and we're sitting right behind the goal. And, he's basically like, hey, man, at the time I was bringing in 40 cases a month. He's like, you're bringing in 40 cases a month. You don't know how to litigate these cases. So you're settling them pre-lit. He's like, these Uber cases have $1 million policies and you're getting $17,000, $22,000, $26,000 settlements. He's like, it's great you figured out how to do this, but I'm telling you, if you let me work up these cases, file them, litigate them, and split the fees with you, you'll make just as much money and you'll do way less work and you could just focus on getting more cases. I remember being like, he drove me home in his Range Rover, and I was like, this guy's trying to get one over on me. I'm like, I'm not this stupid, But it was Chris. It was only through the pain of like then running out of all my money, not being able to pay my employees, stressed as heck. I'm spending all my time in the details of getting medical records and stuff I'm not super good at. I had two paralegals in a row quit. I thought I was honestly like failing. And it was only when that happened where I was like, hey, I need to like make sure I don't go completely bust here. Like, I'm going to take this guy up on his offer. I'm going to just send him the cases. I'm going to settle, the ones that I have, but I'm going to send him future ones. And I'm going to just like regroup my finances in order to reapproach this problem when I kind of get my footing back under me. And what happened that next year was we went from like 40 cases a month to 400 in 1 year. And so when that happened and I started staffing the business as the call center, it was like, okay, maybe I'm never going to, go back to needing to do all the cases in house. I'm like, I am just going to continue to build this brand and build this lead generation funnel. So I would say that was like a big aha. And then the last one was going multi-state. I didn't, even when we had gotten to the 400 cases, if you would have asked me, and this was 2019, 2020, probably more like 20 or 2020, 2021. If you would have asked me like, hey, can you do this in other states? I had a limiting belief that like it was because I was Philly famous and had a bunch of influencer clients. And like the idea that we could replicate this in other cities wasn't something that was obvious to me at that time. And I still remember doing our first test in a second market and seeing the numbers start to come through and being like, oh my God. And so then, that's what teed us up the last, I would say, 2 years to really say, okay, new goal. Like, I want Top Dog to be in every big urban city in America, and have just been focused on that mission of like, how do we go into every city? And when you ask a random Uber driver, who's your go-to lawyer if you're in an accident, you say Top Dog Law.
Well, I was gonna. It's funny you say this. Every time I travel, and I travel quite a bit for business these days. I always ask the Uber driver. Always. So I was in Detroit recently. I guess it's been a little bit, and I was in Detroit. First time I'd been in Detroit, and I was there for Fireproof. As you know, I'm a Fireproof disciple. And I said, "Who? If you got an accident, who you call?" And he said, "Top Dog." I was like, I didn't know you then. I didn't know Top Dog at the time. And I'm like, Top Dog, who's this? And then like, pull out, start Googling and, see the ads and everything. I'm like, oh my gosh. But the first firm he said was you, and I was like, oh my gosh. And so, then to get to meet you, to get to know you and see what you're doing is absolutely amazing. I got to ask though, so what is the biggest either personal lesson or professional lesson that you've learned over the last 9 years through sobriety and through building a business? What's that one thing that you kind of go back to?
Mm. I think on the personal side, I love to just take risk. I think that I've learned that the risks I've taken have paid off, and the fear of failure has held me back. And 80% of the game is psychological. It's not the strategies. We know the strategies, right? The strategies of growing, of scaling. It's the psychological part of overcoming the fear, being scared and doing it anyway. And usually, you look at the idea to not go to the corporate law firm. Well, first, like the biggest fear was to get sober. Then my next biggest fear was to break what vision I thought I had for myself that my parents wanted me to do. I didn't talk to my parents for 3 months after I didn't go to the corporate law firm. I mean, I was terrified to go in a different direction professionally than, what I thought I was supposed to do. Right. Um, so those two decisions, it was like, I took a risk. I bet on myself. I leaned into fear and I did it anyway. Same thing with starting Top Dog. Same thing with pushing Top Dog nationally. Same thing with, some of the decisions we're making around growing the business right now. It's like you have that moment where you can be comfortable, where you can do the thing that feels easy or natural or um, you know, is the option that's probably a good option, right? It's right there for all of us. Is like, what's that thing in your life that you could do? But then here's the other thing. The other thing is usually the thing that
A lot harder.
you don't want to do, that scares you, that is uh pushing yourself beyond a limit that you are comfortable with. And I can tell when I'm like pushing up against my limit. Ed Milet uses this analogy I really like. That's like a thermostat, right? Everybody has a thermostat in your house. You set the thermostat at 72 degrees or whatever you set it at. We're comfortable at 72 degrees. You start pushing the thermostat to a degree that you're not comfortable with. It's hard. I mean, you get very anxious. Like my emotional response to being at a temperature I'm not comfortable with is hard, but it's really those breakthroughs that then push me to the next level of the game.
I love it. Last but not least, set the stage for your pickleball tournament and your upcoming High Rocks. What do we got going? How's this tournament going to shape
Yeah,
out?
man.
Who's the favorite? Who's going to come out? Who's going to win?
Let's go. Well, here's the thing. The highest level of amateur pickleball is 5-0, right? A lot of the guys that play 5-0 play in the pro qualifiers. That's like the big boys. And I've moved up from 3-5 to 4-0 to now I'm in 4-5. And so I'm telling my coach out here in LA is the number 11 singles player in the world. And I'm like, hey man, I need a 4-5 win because I want to go to 5-0. Like I want to be playing with the big boys. And so I gotta get a win today. I'm playing today, and then I'm playing another tournament in 2 weeks. I gotta prove to myself that I can win at 4-5, so I can jump to that division. That's really my goal. So I'm doing that, and then as you know, I'm also doing High Rocks, which is a new exploding event that's a mix of running and functional fitness. It's growing faster than CrossFit ever grew. If you remember when CrossFit first got big, so if you haven't heard of High Rocks, you're gonna hear of it soon. And what I like about it is it's a running race, but it has um, stations that are designed to pump your heart rate, whether those are weighted sandbag lunges or burpee broad jump or the ski erg, right? You basically have to get comfortable. It leans to what I was just talking about, right? You have to get comfortable at 170 beat per minute heart rate or 175 beat per minute heart rate. And it is not fun when you're in those zones for extended periods of time. It's like great analogy of life is like, can you sustain in 170 beats per minute heart rate environment and not give up and to realize, hey, I'm not going to die. I'm going to be fine. I need to keep pushing here, even though every fiber of my being wants to just like roll over and die or slow down or stop. And so I've enjoyed just taking on a new challenge. And how I look at Top Dog is like that's my multi-decade game that I'm playing. And I try very much to look at that through like the infinite game or the marathon game lens. But I need to do these little passion things on the side, these little hobbies on the side, which, I get really excited about. And I think actually keep me uh, better focused and less emotional in running the Top Dog business.
Well, I'm rooting you on, and you inspired me in such a big way to keep going through to fight in the battle. So thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing your story and all of your success.
Awesome. You're the man, Chris. I look at your Stravas pretty much every day. So Strava is a app where you can see other people and their fitness. So you can see Chris did a swim and a run. He did a 50-mile bike ride and a 10-mile run today. And so, I consider myself kind of in that upper echelon of athletic performance for lawyers. But I look at Chris's Strava and I'm like, all right, where's my running shoes at? I gotta strap them on today. I gotta put up some numbers, So you're an inspiration to me, brother.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Safe travels and good luck on the tournament.
All right, thanks a lot.
James, thank you for sharing your story with such honesty. What I love about this conversation is that it's not just about building a business or competing in high rocks, it's about building a life. Your journey reminds us that transformation isn't about waiting for the perfect moment, it's about making small, consistent choices every single day. Whether it's the discipline of recovery, the grind of training, or even picking up a paddle for some pickleball, you've shown that resilience is built in the daily decisions. For those listening, if you want to connect with James or follow along, check out TopDog Law on social media. It's impossible to miss them. And as always, I'll leave you with this. No matter where you are in your journey, keep moving forward, keep showing up, and keep shining your light.